Hey, I'm honored to be here. Thank you. Like many of the speakers that have gone before me today, Chevron believes that the world needs to pursue alternative energy sources and energy efficiency. Both reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You can't? Is that better? Okay. Both alternative energy and energy efficiency reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We promote both. Energy saved is as good as energy found, in our opinion. We also agree there's no single energy supply solution right at the moment. The world needs to pursue a variety of energy sources. It's not unlike the wedge theory that was presented earlier before lunch. So my presentation today will show you what we're doing about it. We believe in the new energy equation, that the world needs to make a transition to cleaner, renewable energy supplies and pursue a much more efficient use of the energy that we do have. So this slide here shows you just sort of a glimpse of the different types of alternative energy we're working on. At your left is more what I call the emerging energy, sort of research phase, things like ocean power, next generation biofuels, and some non-conventional geothermal technologies that we're experimenting with. So we're actually doing research and testing on those new types of things. And then in the middle of the slide, you'll see where some things that have gotten out of the laboratory and are ready to be demonstrated in real life, things like solar thermal power, hydrogen fuel cells. And then over on the right-hand side, there are some alternative energy technologies that are commercially viable today. And things like cogeneration, some types of solar power, wind power, and we're actually installing that and where it makes sense and doing more and more of each year. So now I'll just give you a few highlights about where we see some of these things going. In the biofuels, like I mentioned, we've developed alliances with a lot of universities on the next generation of biofuels. We're not currently making today's ethanol. We buy it where we have to provide, because it's legally mandated, where we sell gasoline products in some markets. But we are not really in favor of the food type, corn-based type ethanol. And so all of our efforts are trying to find some next generation of cellulosic-based, maybe some switchgrass or something that we don't even know of yet, that people talked about algae and other things. We think that's a much more practical solution, and that's where we're putting all of our efforts. In geothermal, Chevron's actually the largest geothermal energy producer in the world. The trouble with geothermal is it's kind of limited where you can use it. You have the hot rock, and you have to have just the right resource to be able to use it. Good thing is it generates virtually no greenhouse gas emissions. So this next one is cogeneration. That's where you generate electricity and thermal energy together, combined, rather than generate them separately. And the efficiencies of this are so much better than generating them separately. And so it saves money and reduces a lot of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, nitrogen oxides, and other types of emissions. We're actually in the process of installing that at the University of Utah. Should be done by July, but more on that later. So there was a lot of buzz a couple years ago about hydrogen and fuel cells. And we jumped in it just like a lot of other people did. We've done a lot of research on it. We've developed several test stations where we run fleets of buses and automobiles that are running on hydrogen using fuel cells as power. So we've got about about 6 of these things up and running throughout the United States, from coast to coast and in between, trying to get real-life experience with how that might work. We've also installed some fuel cells both at our own facilities that Chevron has, as well as for our customers' facilities, and I'll show you more about that later. So wind power is one of my favorites. You know, where it's very windy, this is one of the most economic of the renewable energy sources. And in fact, you know, the key with this one right now is that you can't buy wind turbines. They're sold out. You know, if I want to place an order for some and get them by the end of this year, I can't. And so the industry is adding to manufacturing capacity. And I think that eventually we'll get out of this bottleneck, but this is a very exciting source of alternative energy. It was also mentioned by one of the previous speakers that another constraint is getting the power from where it's very windy to where people live and have the load, you know, where the load is. And so that's a transmission constraint issue that's also very important to wind power. But this is a very exciting opportunity, and I think we'll see more and more wind power each year in this world. So this is another of my favorite technologies, is solar power. And this right here is a slide of solar photovoltaics. And most of you may know this, but this takes sunshine and turns it directly into electricity without any moving parts, without any noise. It's silent, and it is clean, zero emissions. It's a really great technology, and the remaining bug on this one is just getting the costs down. Right now, it's just very high cost per kilowatt hour compared to what people currently pay for utility grid power, but it has been coming down. And in fact, more and more of it's getting installed to the point where recently, over the last year, the actual silicon used as raw material to make the cells was in short supply, and was at some point a constraint. But again, a lot of additional capacity is being built, and we would expect that constraint will be relieved.
No water. Doesn't require water.
And it doesn't require water. This is a picture of a relatively large 500 kilowatt solar photovoltaics plant that we built several years ago at one of our California facilities. It's been running. We built it to see how this would work. And it's been running very well. You know, it's reliable. There's nothing to break down, and it just generates electricity. You know, it starts ramping up in the morning, peaking in the middle of the day, and then coming on down in the afternoon, and of course, nothing at night. So this has been a good success, but again, the economics still quite aren't there. And when you start to look at solar power for the large scale type of opportunities, we actually are now starting to lean towards what's called concentrating solar power, which is using thermal mirrors to concentrate the energy to heat a fluid. I'll show you what that looks like right here. So all these mirrors, acres and acres, thousands of mirrors, point at this tower that's got running water through it. Tremendous amount of heat energy. And it boils that water, makes steam, which turns a steam turbine and generates electricity. And it turns out you can't. Now, one of the things about this, you can't build it small. You're never going to have this on your rooftop, your backyard, or at University of Utah. However, the good part about it is that on a utility scale in the desert and areas like that, where you can put acres and acres of these things, it actually looks like the kilowatt hour price is much, much better than the solar photovoltaics, getting almost closer to wind. And so this technology is pretty brand new. There's been a couple of plants built in Spain. We're building one of these also in California, not far from that solar photovoltaic plant I showed you, to start comparing how this works and see if we can make it work, see how it works compared to photovoltaics. So that's kind of what some of the stuff that we're doing in the area of alternative energy and the Chevron facilities. I'm actually with a unit of Chevron called Chevron Energy Solutions. And we provide energy efficiency and alternative energy solutions to customers, both to Chevron, but also to other customers throughout the U.S. So I'm going to kind of show you a little bit about what that looks like in terms of some examples. Yeah, I know you've all just eaten lunch, so just sit back, relax. I'll show you a few examples. We'll have a good time. Okay, so this is in Alameda, California, one of our more interesting projects. I don't know if you can make it out, but there's solar on the roof, 1,000 kilowatts of solar. There's the photo to the right is a 1,000 kilowatt hydrogen fuel cell, providing them power. And we also had spent years improving their energy efficiency to get their energy consumption way down. So this has been a real successful project. I like this one too. It's amazing, people don't sort mail anymore. There's so much mail, these huge distribution warehouses are all automated. And you've got conveyors and air pressure flying all over the place to move the mail, and there's readers that can read the addresses and sort it. These very, very large U.S. Postal Service distribution centers, we've done several of these now. We've dramatically improved the energy efficiency and installed renewable power. And in this particular example, we cut their electricity purchase in half. And you can see there's a parking shade structures, and I don't know if you can make that out, especially in the back, but that's solar power on top of those parking shades. And one of the fringe benefits is that they're finding at all of these that we've done is that the employees are getting to work early to capture these spaces that are in the shade. So the post office is thrilled. Now, it's after lunch, so I can use this example. I don't do it if I'm going on before lunch because it can ruin people's appetite. This is basically a sewage treatment to power example of a project we've done. It was kind of innovative. Sewage treatment plants generate methane gas. That's a horrible greenhouse gas pollutant. In many cases, it's just typically it's flared to, mitigate the problem, but we've installed a project to capture it and turn it into power, but we went one up on that. We figured out that used restaurant greases that are typically going into systems or clogging drains or that sort of thing, we set up a system where you could inject that directly into this treatment plant, and it actually spiked the methane gas production by quite a bit and made a lot more gas to make a lot more power, and now we can run almost the entire plant's power from just the gas that it's producing. Yeah. So here's another one of our largest solar projects that we're just finished up. It's a large community college district. This is the largest solar installation in higher education in the U.S. And it also involves energy efficiency. So we went in and did the high efficiency lighting, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and all that sort of thing to reduce the energy load. And then we installed a bunch of these parking structures that with photovoltaic solar power on top of them to provide electricity to this community college district. There's 34 of these. It's 3,200 kilowatts of electrical power altogether. This is another one like that we did at UC Fresno. Any UC Fresno people in the audience? Oh, we got one, okay. Good. Very similar project. So I don't know if you've seen that out there, but you ever got underneath one of those, no? Parking shade? No? So is there any University of Utah people in here? Show of hands. Oh, okay, good. So we've actually been doing work at the University of Utah for quite a number of years. And it started back in around 1999, I believe, with energy efficiency measures. And it's quite an impressive story. 68,000 high efficiency lights, 100 high-efficiency motors, almost 100 variable speed drives that help make those motors even more efficient, because an electrical motor is a fixed speed machine. AC motors, they just run at one speed, and you don't always want the speed that they go at, so variable speed drives can help adjust the frequency of the power and get just the speed you need, so there's no energy losses. And we also did about 2,000 water savings devices at the University of Utah, so that was a big thing too. So once we finished up improving the energy efficiency, we decided, well, what else are we going to do? And sure enough, they were interested in alternative energy, and we've been building a cogeneration plant, 6,000 kilowatts, a plant that will produce the electricity as well as the heating, thermal energy, hot water, that'll heat the university both in the summer and the winter. It's got auxiliary firing, so it's designed where the natural heat load out of the cogeneration plant is just right for the lowest heating load, which is in the summer here. But then you can add a little natural gas to it to beef that up if you need to in the winter. I forgot to mention, but these projects, all the ones I've showed you, pay for themselves. They pay for themselves in, it may take more than 10 years, but they do pay for themselves, and they also all reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This particular cogen reduces greenhouse gas emissions by 58,000 tons a year. That's 58,000 tons a year. As I mentioned, we also do work for the Chevron facilities. And that's a pretty good story too. Since 1992, we've improved the Chevron facility energy efficiency by 27%. And our work's not done there yet. We continue to try to improve upon that. These are examples of oil fields. This one's in California and this one's in Indonesia. So this is my last slide, and I know that there's a lot of sort of doom and gloom about the climate change issue, and we recognize that. I do think that the future's bright for alternative energy. This world is going to use more of it and more of it every year. The Earth receives 10,000 times more energy from the sun than is used by humans. So we can just harness that, and there's a lot being done right now, as you can see. We're not there yet. We've got a long way to go. But we also think that we haven't figured out what the silver bullet answer is. So we're working on a whole bunch of things, seeing which ones will be the ones that will work out for the future. And in the meantime, we're really focusing on the energy efficiency, because that is something that we can do right now and make sense, today. So that's my prepared remarks, and I can take any questions you might have.
We probably have time for about 3 questions.
Hi, David.
Yep.
Over here. Other side. There you go.
Oh.
Thanks. Are there any, there's a bill in the Senate now where the solar investment tax credits and the wind production credits are part of the bill. And the funding is a big issue there. I'm wondering what Chevron's position is on the funding for the tax incentives for alternative fuels.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Alternative things.
It kind of goes like this. We promote and endorse incentives and rebates and things like that for alternative energy in the near term. In the longer term, anything that is relying on that isn't really sustainable, so that it would be essentially subsidized 20, 30, 50 years from now. It just doesn't make sense to us. But we definitely support the idea that as we start to get these alternative energies like solar, wind, and others viable, get the production up, the price per unit down, the price per kilowatt down, that it will take some help to bring it to critical mass.
So do you think the subsidization of oil and gas is still justified now after all these years? Based on what you just said.
I'll just hold with what I said.
I'm interested in the relationship between Chevron and these organizations, these universities and so forth. That how does that relationship exist, and I'm interested in how that works.
Yeah, good question. So the way it works is we have this unit that I'm a part of that's called Chevron Energy Solutions, and we either respond to RFPs, requests for proposals, or we go out actually and proactively try to work with the universities, K through 12 schools, community college districts, hospitals. We have a whole force of business development people that try to go out and find opportunities. And the way it works is we'll go in, and if they're interested, we'll do a walkthrough. We call it a feasibility analysis, and see, hey, look, okay, basically we can do this list of things that we think there's some potential and it might save you about this much, and are you interested? And if they are, we then go ahead and move to what we call a comprehensive energy analysis, and get a bunch of engineers in there and really start to figure out exactly what it'll cost and what the benefits will be, and at that point give them a fixed proposal. And if that university or school or whatever customer it is interested, we'll go ahead and do the job, actually design, build it, and turn it over to them. Since these projects pay for themselves, there are financing organizations that give very, very low interest financing. So the schools don't even have to pay for it with their own money. The other thing we do is we guarantee the energy savings. So if it falls short, we say, hey, look, we're going to do all these things, and it's going to save you, whatever, a zillion kilowatts per year. And for every kilowatt it didn't save, we'll pay. And so that it's, there's no risk for the university or school that wants to go ahead and get that done.
Great. I think we maybe have one more over here. Or did you?
On the concentrated solar example that you proposed, what are the environmental implications or issues that you've been faced with in putting such a large amount of glass panels into that area? And also, where does the water come from, and how much water is used for that concentrated solar?
Those are good questions. So for the concentrating solar power, you've got all these mirrors focusing this energy to heat a fluid. Now, that's a closed-loop fluid system, actually. We're not using water through there. It's usually some sort of oil or other type of chemical that has good heat properties, and so it can get really hot, 1,500 degrees or something like that, 1,200 to 1,500 degrees. And then we just exchange that energy with water to make steam. So it's like just heating up water with that hot oil. And so where do we get the water from? I mean, you have basically that also is a closed loop system, except that just like in a lot of power plants where you have steam generation, you do consume a little bit of water in the process, but it is intended to be, fairly closed loop. You heat the water up, it turns into steam, it goes through a steam turbine, it condenses, and you reuse it in general. It is a little difficult in some of the places where we want to build these things because they are deserts, and so you need to find well water or other things to have at least a little bit of water for the system, but it's not a huge water consumer. Okay. That it? Okay. Oh, the environmental issues. Sorry about that. So the environmental issues is that it just basically takes up a lot of space. Some of these plants will be 500 to 1,000 acres. And so there may be indigenous species located, in some of these areas. That's really the only thing that we've seen. It's, it's a little different with wind. You've got sort of bird issues and in some cases bat issues that seem to always be wherever you're going to build, look to build a wind farm. We don't see that with the concentrating solar power. It would be just whatever is already living on that 1,000 acres. It's nothing special in terms of environmental. There's no emissions, zero emissions. So, no greenhouse gas emissions, no NOx emissions, no SOx emissions. So it's very clean. I guess I think I'm out of time, so thank you very much.